My name is Marcus D. Hale. I am 47 years old, and I want to tell you about the morning I sat in a glass-walled conference room and watched a man I had never met get handed everything I'd spent 19 years building. I found out about the meeting at 7:52 a.m., not through a conversation, not through a phone call, through a calendar invite that landed in my inbox while I was still in the parking lot finishing my coffee. The subject line said, "Team alignment, mandatory." That was it. No agenda, no context, just those 3 words and a room number. I walked in at 8 a.m. sharp. Derek Callum was already standing at the head of the table. Derek was my VP of operations, 38 years old, always wore a pressed shirt, always had the right words ready. He had a way of making everything sound like a plan, even when nothing was planned at all. Sitting to his left was someone I did not recognize. Young, maybe 31, 32. Dark suit, clean haircut, the kind of confident posture you learn in a classroom, not in a warehouse. Derek smiled when I walked in. It was the kind of smile that means nothing. He let everyone settle. Then he started talking. He talked about the company's direction. He talked about growth. He used the phrase forward-facing leadership twice in the first 2 minutes. I had heard Derek talk like this many times before. I knew how to listen past the words and find the meaning underneath. That morning, it did not take long. Derek turned to the young man beside him and said his name was Jordan Peele. He said Jordan had just come from a top NBA program. He said Jordan brought fresh energy to the team. He said Jordan would be stepping in as the new head of operations, effective immediately, to help drive the company into its next chapter. Head of operations. I had been doing that job for 3 years without the title. I had run the daily operations of 11 regional hubs, managed a team of 7, and kept our largest client accounts from walking out the door more times than I could count. No one had ever given me that title. No one had ever sat me down and explained why. And now, on a Tuesday morning, in a glass room, in front of my colleagues, it was being handed to a 31-year-old in a $600 suit who had never once set foot on a warehouse floor. I did not say a word. I sat there, and I watched Jordan nod politely at the table. I watched him shake Derek's hand. I watched my colleagues glance at me for a half second and then look away, the way people do when they witness something uncomfortable but do not want to be part of it. Derek never looked at me. Not once. Not directly. In that entire meeting, he referred to my name exactly 1 time to say that I would be available to support Jordan's transition. That was my role in the announcement. Support. Transition. I have thought about that moment many times since. Not with bitterness. With clarity, because that moment told me everything I needed to know about where I stood, and more importantly, it told me exactly what I needed to do next. When a meeting ended, people filtered out. Jordan moved toward the door and gave me a firm handshake. He said he was looking forward to working together. He seemed genuine. And here is the thing. I did not blame Jordan. Not then. Not now. Jordan was just someone who took an opportunity that was offered to him. I understood that. What I did not forget was who offered it. I drove home that evening in silence. My wife Sandra asked me how my day was. I told her it was fine. I was not ready to talk about it yet. I needed to sit with it for a night. I needed to let it become real before I let it become something else. But while I sat at the dinner table that evening, my mind was already moving. I was thinking about OptiFlow, the operations system I had helped build over 7 years that every single one of our 11 hubs depended on. I was thinking about the exception handling logic buried inside it that no one else at Veracor fully understood. I was thinking about Phil Garrett at National Fleet Solutions, who called my personal cell when things went wrong, not the company line. I was thinking about 14 client relationships that existed because of my name, not the brand on the building. And I was thinking about the system access password Derek had been asking me for 6 months to hand over. I had never given it to him. I told myself at the time that I was just being careful, cautious, that I would share it when the time was right. Sitting at that dinner table, watching Sandra clear the dishes, I realized the time was never going to be right, because the time had already passed. I joined Veracor Systems in the spring, 19 years ago. I was 28 years old. The company had 40 employees and 1 warehouse hub operating out a rented facility near the edge of the city. We did regional freight routing for small and mid-sized retailers. Nothing glamorous, but the work was real and it mattered, and I was good at it from the beginning. My title was Field Operations Coordinator, which in a company that's small meant I did whatever needed to be done. I was on the floor. I was on the phone. I was in the parking lot at 6 in the morning talking to drivers who were frustrated about route assignments. I was in the back office at night learning the routing software because no one else wanted to. I helped design the first version of what would later become OptiFlow. It started as a basic spreadsheet system I built to track hub capacity and driver availability. Over time, as the company grew, we brought in developers to build it into something more sophisticated. But the logic underneath it, the rules that told the system what to do when things got complicated, that came from me. From years of watching what broke, understanding why it broke, and building something that would not break the same way twice. I trained the first group of regional team leads. 4 of them. I taught them how to read the system, how to handle escalations, how to talk to clients when a shipment was late. 2 of them are still at Vericore today. They still call me when something does not make sense. In 2019, we almost lost everything. There was a supply chain disruption that hit the entire industry. Delays everywhere. Costs going up. Clients pulling contracts left and right. Our biggest retail account at the time, a regional grocery chain named Harmon Grocery, was 3 days away from walking. Their incoming shipments were backed up. Their stores were running low on non-perishables. Their logistics director was furious and had every right to be. On a Thursday evening, I drove to their distribution facility. It was 11 p.m. I brought a marker and a notepad. I sat in a conference room with their team for 6 hours and reworked their entire intake schedule on a whiteboard. We restructured the delivery windows, adjusted the unloading priority, and built a temporary buffer system that got them through the next 10 days while the broader disruption settled. I saved that contract. When I came back to Vericore the next week, my manager at the time shook my hand and said, "Good work, Marcus." I received a $2,000 bonus 2 weeks later. My title did not change. My salary did not change. No announcement was made to the company. No recognition in any meeting. Just a handshake and a check. I told myself that was fine, that the work was what mattered, that the recognition would come eventually. I want to be honest with you right now. I was not naive. I was patient. Those are 2 very different things. Naive is when you do not see what is happening. Patient is when you see it clearly and choose to wait because you still believe it will get better. I believed it for a long time. Then Derek Callum arrived. He came from a management consulting firm 4 years ago. Sharp dresser, quick talker. He had never run a live warehouse operation, had never managed a client escalation in real time, had never stood in a hub at midnight trying to figure out why a routing error was cascading across 3 delivery zones. But Derek was good at one thing. He was very good at being in the right room at the right time and making sure the people above him remembered his name. He learned quickly how to present other people's results as his own vision. He learned how to speak the language of executives without ever having done the actual work. And 4 years after he arrived, he was my boss. There is a difference between knowing how a company works and knowing why it works. Derek knew the first part. He had learned the org chart, the client names, the revenue numbers, the quarterly targets. He could talk about Vericore in a board meeting and sound like someone who had built it from the ground up. He was good at that. I will give him that much. But he never understood the second part. He never understood the invisible layer underneath everything. The layer that actually kept the operation running day after day without falling apart. Let me explain what I mean. Vericore's entire operations platform ran through a system called OptiFlow. I have already mentioned it, but I want you to understand what it actually did because this matters. OptiFlow was not just a scheduling tool. It managed real-time routing across 11 regional hubs. It balanced warehouse load so that no single facility got overwhelmed during peak periods. It handled driver dispatch, tracked delivery windows, and monitored our service level agreements, our SLAs, with every major client in real time. When everything was working correctly, OptiFlow was invisible. Shipments moved. Clients were happy. Numbers looked good. Derek sat in meetings and talked about operational efficiency like it was something he had engineered. But OptiFlow had layers underneath the surface that were not visible to anyone who had not built them. Over 7 years, I had added what I called exception handling rules. These were specific instructions built into the system that told OptiFlow what to do when something unusual happened. A hub falling behind on intake, a driver shortage in a specific zone, a client shipment flagged as high priority arriving at the wrong facility. The system did not crash when these things happened. It rerouted. It adjusted. It compensated. That was because of the rules I had written. The problem was that none of those rules were fully documented. I had started a system manual twice over the years. Both times, other priorities pulled me away and the manual stayed incomplete. The original software vendor who helped us build the base platform went out of business in 2021. Their support team was gone. Their documentation was outdated. And the developers we had used since then were contractors who worked from the surface level of the system. They had never gone deep into the exception logic. I was the only person alive who fully understood why OptiFlow behaved the way it did when things went wrong. Derek did not know this. Or maybe he knew it in a surface way, the way you know a bridge exists without knowing anything about the engineering that holds it up. You drive across it every day and you trust that it works. You do not think about what happens if one of the cables snaps. Beyond the system, there was something else Derek never truly understood. 3 of Vericor's top 5 revenue clients had a direct personal relationship with me. Not with the company, with me. Phil Garrett at National Fleet Solutions, Karen Obi at Harmon Grocery, Tom Briggs at a regional pharmaceutical distributor called Medline Central. These were not casual professional relationships. These were relationships built over years of showing up when things went wrong, of being honest when something was delayed instead of making excuses, of remembering small details, a deadline that mattered, a staffing change on their end, a quarter where they needed more flexibility. They did not call the Vericor main line when they had a problem. They called my cell. For 6 months before the conference room meeting, Derek had been quietly pushing me to change that. He asked me to CC him on all client correspondence. He asked me to schedule introduction calls so he could build relationships with the top accounts. He asked me more than once to write a complete system manual for OptiFlow. I gave him summaries. I CC'd him on routine updates. I started an introduction with one lower-tier client. But I never handed over the exception logic documentation. And I never brought Derek in a room with Phil, Karen, or Tom. People ask me if I was being strategic. Honestly, I was being careful. There's a feeling you get sometimes, quiet, hard to name, that tells you something is not right, that the ground under your feet is less solid than it looks. I had that feeling for a long time before the conference room. I didn't know exactly what was coming, but I knew something was, and I was not going to make it easy. The next morning, Derek called me into his office at 9 o'clock. His office was on the 3rd floor, corner room, glass on 2 sides. He always kept it neat. Laptop centered on the desk. One framed photo of his family on the shelf behind him. A small whiteboard on the wall with 4 words written on it that he changed every week. That week it said, focus, align, execute, win. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. I sat down. He started the way he always started difficult conversations, with a compliment. He told me I was one of the most experienced people in the building. He told me that my knowledge of the operation was irreplaceable. He used that word, irreplaceable. I remember it clearly because of what came next. He told me my role was being restructured. He said that with Jordan stepping into the head of operations position, it made sense to evolve my role into something more focused. He said I would now serve as a senior operations advisor. I would still have the same salary. I would still be a valued part of the team. But my 7 direct reports would now report to Jordan. And I would report to Jordan as well. He said it like he was offering me something. I let him finish. Then I asked one question. Is this a demotion? Derek paused. Not long. Maybe 2 seconds. But I noticed it. It's a realignment, he said. I nodded. I did not say anything else. I did not argue. I did not ask about the process or whether HR had approved the title or why I was hearing about this the morning after a company-wide meeting where it had already been announced. I just nodded, stood up, thanked him for his time, and walked back to my desk. Some people would have pushed back in that moment, raised their voice, demanded an explanation. I understand that impulse, but I have learned something over the years. When someone has already made a decision, Arguing about it in their office does not change the decision. It only changes how they feel about you afterward. And I did not want Derek to feel anything about me at all. I wanted to be calm and quiet and invisible, just long enough to figure out what I was going to do. I sat at my desk for about 20 minutes doing nothing. Then I opened my laptop and pulled up my resume. I had not touched it since 2005. It was saved in an old folder I almost could not find. The formatting was outdated. Some of the early job history was from positions I barely remembered, but it was there. I spent an hour updating it. Quietly. Professionally. I listed every system I had built, every client I had retained, every crisis I had resolved. By the time I was done, it did not look like the resume of a man who had been passed over. It looked like the resume of a man who had been running a company inside a company for 19 years. After that, I picked up my phone. 3 weeks earlier, I had lunch with a man named Raymond Cole. Raymond and I had worked together at Vericor early in my career before he left to grow with another firm. He now ran operations at a company called CrossPath Dynamics, a logistics firm that had been expanding aggressively into the Midwest region. At that lunch, Raymond had mentioned casually that they were building out a new regional leadership team. He had looked at me when he said it in a way that was not entirely casual. I had smiled and changed the subject. Now I picked up my phone and sent him a text. It said, "Raymond, that conversation we had a few weeks ago, I think I am ready to have it properly. Let me know when you have time." He replied in 11 minutes. I put my phone down and looked around the office. At the open floor plan. At the team that used to report to me, now technically reporting to a 31-year-old who is still getting his badge photo taken. At the system running quietly in the background that I had spent 7 years building. There was no anger in me. I want to make that clear. Anger burns fast, and it burns you first. What I felt was something quieter. Something more useful. For 19 years, I had shown up every day and given this company everything I had. I had told myself it would be recognized. I had told myself patience was a virtue. I had told myself the right people would eventually see what I had built. That morning, I finally stopped telling myself that story. I wasn't angry. I was finally paying attention. Jordan Peele officially took over the operations director's seat on a Monday. I watched it happen from my desk. His name went up on the internal directory under head of operations. His email signature was updated. His access levels were elevated inside the company system. He got the corner office on the second floor, the one with the standing desk and the window that looked out over the loading area. I had been asked twice over the years if I wanted that office. Both times I said I was fine where I was. Jordan seemed eager. I will say that for him. He spent Monday and Tuesday meeting with the team, asking questions, taking notes in a leather-bound notebook he carried everywhere. He sent a department-wide email on Tuesday afternoon introducing himself and outlining his operational philosophy. It was well-written, clean language, the kind of email that looks impressive until you realize there is no specific knowledge behind it, just structure and confidence. I read it once and moved on. Wednesday was when the first problem appeared. It started quietly, the way these things always do. A flag inside OptiFlow showing a load imbalance at our Cincinnati hub. Too much volume hitting the intake floor during a window that the system was not routing around correctly. This was not a new problem. It was a recurring edge case that I had been managing every single quarter for 3 years. The fix was not complicated, but it was specific. 48 hours before peak intake, I would manually adjust 3 routing rules inside OptiFlow, rerouting a portion of the incoming volume to our Dayton overflow facility and adjusting the driver dispatch windows to compensate. It took about 20 minutes once you knew what you were doing. The entire process existed entirely inside my head. I had never written it down. There had never been a reason to. I had always just handled it before anyone noticed it was becoming a problem. Jordan did not know this process existed. Neither did anyone else on the team. By Thursday morning, the Cincinnati hub was running 4 hours behind schedule. Intake was backed up. Drivers were sitting idle, waiting for assignments that the system was not generating correctly. The floor supervisor at Cincinnati, a reliable man named Gary, called the operations line 3 times before 9 a.m. The calls went to Jordan's team. Nobody had an answer for Gary. At 9:47 a.m., my phone rang. It was Phil Garrett, logistics manager at National Fleet Solutions, our largest auto parts client. Phil had a shipment sitting at the Cincinnati hub that was supposed to be moving. He had called the main Vericor account line first. He had been transferred twice and still had no answer. So he did what he always did when something was wrong. He called me. I answered on the second ring. I listened to him explain the situation. I was calm. I told him I was aware of the issue and that I would look into it and follow up with him shortly. Phil trusted that. He thanked me and hung up. Phil had been calling my cell for 6 years. He did not question whether I still had the authority to handle it. In his mind, I was Vericor, not a title, not a department. Me. After I hung up with Phil, I sat for a moment and thought carefully about what to do next. Then I opened my email and wrote a message to Jordan and Derek. It was professional and brief. I told them I had received a call from National Fleet Solutions regarding a delay at the Cincinnati hub. I explained that there appeared to be a load imbalance affecting the intake schedule. I told them I was happy to walk Jordan through the resolution process if that would be helpful. I did not attach any instructions. I did not explain the 3 routing rules. I did not mention the Dayton overflow workaround. I sent the email and waited. I'm not going to pretend I did not know what I was doing. I knew exactly what I was doing. I was giving them the chance to solve it themselves. I was giving Jordan the opportunity to show what he knew. I was giving Derek the chance to demonstrate that his decision to replace me with someone newer and shinier had been the right one. I gave him that chance because I genuinely believed they deserved it. But I had spent 19 years inside that system, and I already knew they couldn't fix it. What happened over the next 6 hours was not dramatic in the way people imagine when they hear a story like this. There was no single explosion, no one moment where everything fell apart at once. It was more like watching a small crack move slowly across a wall. Quiet at first, almost invisible, and then suddenly the whole structure shifts and you realize the crack was never small at all. It started with Jordan making a decision. At some point late Thursday morning, Jordan went into OptiFlow and attempted to resolve the Cincinnati backlog himself. I found this out later from Priya, one of my former direct reports, a sharp and careful woman who had been with the team for 4 years and who still trusted me more than she trusted the new arrangement. Priya sent me a short message around noon that said simply, "He went into the system." I read that message and set my phone down on my desk. I already knew what was coming. Inside OptiFlow, there's a function called manual dispatch override. It allows a user to bypass the system's automatic routing and push assignments directly to drivers and hubs. It exists for emergencies. It is useful in very specific situations when you understand exactly what downstream effects it will trigger. In the wrong hands, used without that understanding, it does not solve a backlog. It multiplies it. When Jordan overrode the dispatch queue at the Cincinnati hub, he cleared the immediate visual backlog on his screen. It probably looked like progress. The queue emptied. The numbers changed. But what actually happened was that the volume he pushed did not disappear. It was forced into the routing pipelines feeding our Columbus and Indianapolis hubs without any adjustment to their intake capacity or driver availability. By 1 o'clock in the afternoon, 3 hubs were behind. Cincinnati was still struggling. Columbus was now flagged. Indianapolis had gone into a priority queue overflow that the system was not equipped to resolve automatically because the exception handling rules, my rules, were designed to prevent you from ever getting into that state in the first place. They were not designed to get you out of it once you were already there. By 2:30, the SLA dashboard turned red. Vericor shares its real-time SLA dashboard with top-tier clients as part of our service agreements. It is a transparency feature. Clients can log in and see their shipment status, their delivery window compliance, and whether their account is inside or outside the agreed service levels. It is a feature Derek had promoted heavily in client presentations. He liked to say it showed confidence. That afternoon, it showed something else. National Fleet Solutions went red at 2:14 p.m. Harmon Grocery went red at 2:31 p.m. Both accounts were now technically in breach of service territory under their contracts, which meant both clients had the legal right to escalate formally, request penalty reviews, or begin exploring alternative providers. Both of those accounts were mine. I was sitting at my desk when I watched the dashboard update on my screen. I had not been removed from system view access yet. That paperwork had apparently not been completed, so I saw it happen in real time. I watched the indicators shift from yellow to red, and I felt something that I can only describe as a very quiet and very heavy kind of sadness. Not satisfaction, sadness. Because those clients trusted Vericor. They trusted me, and they were caught in the middle of something they had nothing to do with. At 3 o'clock, Derek called an emergency operations meeting. I was not invited. I found out through Priya, who sent me a message from inside the meeting room that said, "It's not good in here." From what Priya told me afterward, the meeting was tense. Derek was holding it together on the surface, but his voice had an edge to it. Jordan was asked to walk through what steps he had taken. He did. Someone on the team pointed out that the override had caused the Columbus and Indianapolis flags. Jordan acknowledged it. Derek asked if anyone knew how to reverse it cleanly without making it worse. Nobody did. After a pause, someone mentioned my name. Derek was quiet for a moment. Then he told the team to reach out to me and ask if I could assist. At 3:47 p.m., a Slack message appeared on my screen from Jordan. It said, "Hey Marcus, do you have a few minutes?" I read it. I set my phone face down on the desk. I stood up, walked to the small kitchen area near the back of the floor, and made myself a cup of coffee. I stood there for a moment looking out the window at the parking lot below. It was a gray afternoon. A few drivers were moving around the loading area. The kind of ordinary Thursday afternoon that looks like any other until it is not. I walked back to my desk. I sat down. I picked up my phone and typed a reply to Jordan. It said, "Hey Jordan, I'm actually stepping out for a few hours this afternoon. I can connect tomorrow morning. Does 9 a.m. work?" I read it once. Then I sent it. I closed my laptop, gathered my jacket, and walked to the elevator. The crisis was real. The hubs were falling behind. 2 of my most important client accounts were in the red, and I was the only person in that building who knew exactly how to fix it. I was choosing very carefully what to do with that fact. My phone rang at 5:15 p.m. I was sitting in my car in the parking lot of a grocery store 3 miles from the office. I had not gone inside. I had just parked there because I needed to be somewhere quiet and still and away from that building. The name on the screen was Derek Callum. I let it ring twice. Then I answered. His voice was different from how it usually sounded. Derek was always controlled, always measured. He had a way of speaking that made everything feel like it was going according to plan, even when it clearly was not. But that evening his voice was tight. Not panicked. Derek was too practiced for that, but tight. Like a rope that has been pulled just short of its limit. He did not open with a compliment this time. He told me the team was working through some operational challenges. He said they could use some guidance on a few technical points inside OptiFlow. He used the phrase institutional knowledge, which almost made me smile because that was the same knowledge he had been trying to extract from me for 6 months and hand over to someone else. He said the team would really benefit from my input that evening if I was available. I listened to all of it without interrupting. Then I told him, calmly and professionally, that I had a prior commitment that evening, but that I was happy to come in early the next morning and sit down with the team. I told him I had already messaged Jordan about 9 o'clock. Derek pushed. He said the situation was time-sensitive. He said it would really help if I could make myself available tonight. He said he would make sure it was noted and appreciated. I told him I understood and that I was sorry I could not make it work tonight, but that I would be there first thing in the morning. He paused. Then he said he understood. Then he hung up. I sat in that parking lot for another few minutes. Then I called Raymond Cole. The conversation was short. Raymond had been expecting to hear from me. I told him I was ready to talk seriously about the role at CrossPath Dynamics. He told me the position was still open. Senior Director of Regional Operations. Base salary of $148,000 per year. That was $31,000 more than I was currently earning. Performance bonus structure on top of that. Full benefits. A team of 11 to start, expanding to 18 within the first year. He said he could have a formal offer letter to me before 6 o'clock that evening. I told him that would be fine. I drove home. Sandra was making dinner when I walked in. The kitchen smelled like something warm and familiar, and I stood in the doorway for a moment longer than I needed to. She looked up and asked how I was doing. I told her I was okay. I sat down at the kitchen table and waited. At 5:58 p.m., the offer letter arrived in my email. I read it slowly. All of it. Every line. I am the kind of person who reads the full document. When I finished, I set my phone down on the table and looked at the wall for a moment. It did not feel like winning. I want to be honest about that. It felt like something quieter. Like exhaling after holding your breath for a very long time. Like finally putting down something heavy that you had carried so long you had stopped noticing the weight. I showed Sandra. She read it. Then she put her hand on my arm and said, "You have been holding that place together for a long time, Marcus." I nodded. That night, after dinner, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote my resignation letter. For sentences, I thanked Veracor for 19 years. I stayed on my last day. I wished the company well. I did not mention Jordan. I did not mention the crisis. I did not mention Derek. I set my start date at CrossPath for 2 weeks out. Then I went to bed. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I slept the whole night through. I submitted my resignation at 8:03 a.m. the next morning. I sent it by email, copying Derek and the HR director simultaneously. It was 4 sentences long. It was the cleanest thing I had written in years. By 9:15 a.m., Derek had called my cell twice. I let both calls go to voicemail. I did not listen to the messages until later that afternoon. They were what I expected. Careful language, phrases like, "Let's talk before anything is finalized," and "I think there may have been some miscommunication." I did not return either call. HR reached out by email at 10:30 a.m. asking if I would be open to a conversation about a counteroffer. I replied within the hour. My message said, "I appreciate the kind words. My decision is final." I cleared my desk that afternoon. It did not take long. 19 years, and it fit into one small box. A few books. A framed photo of Sandra and Caleb from a vacation we took 4 years ago. A coffee mug I had been using since 2011. I carried the box in my car, put it in the trunk, and drove home without looking back at the building. What happened over the 2 weeks that followed, I learned mostly through Priya. She kept me updated. Not out of gossip. That was not who Priya was. She told me because she cared about what was happening and she trusted me to listen without using it for anything. National Fleet Solutions filed a formal service complaint within the first week. Phil Garrett had been patient, but 2 days of missed delivery windows and unanswered escalation calls had pushed the account into official dispute territory. Their legal team sent a letter requesting a review of the service level agreement and a timeline for remediation. Harmon Grocery requested a contract review meeting. Karen Obi called the main Veracor line and, when she could not get a satisfying answer, sent an email directly to Derek asking who her new point of contact was and what the plan was for stabilizing their account. Derek personally replied, "I heard it did not go well. Priya told me that 3 members of my former team had quietly updated their resumes. One had already taken a phone screen with another company. The team that Jordan had inherited was not the team I had built anymore. Not because the people had changed, but because the structure around them had changed. The trust, the clarity, the invisible steadiness that I had provided without anyone noticing it. OptiFlow continued to behave unpredictably. Without the exception handling logic being properly understood, the system was producing errors that no one could trace to their source. 2 weeks after I left, Veracor brought in an outside operations consultant to audit the platform. The rate was $18,000 per week. The consultant's preliminary report, which Priya saw because she was asked to pull historical system logs, stated that OptiFlow contained extensive, undocumented custom logic built into its exception handling architecture. The report estimated that fully mapping and stabilizing the system would require a minimum of 6 months of dedicated analysis. 6 months, at $18,000 a week. Priya told me this in a text message. I read it, replied with a brief thank you, and put my phone down. I was not surprised. I was not pleased. I felt nothing dramatic. I just knew that it was true, the way you know something is true when you built it with your own hands over 7 years and understood every layer of it. I want to be clear about something before I close this story. I did not set out to watch anything burn. That was never my intention, and it was never my goal. I did not sabotage OptiFlow. I did not poison any client relationships. I did not tell Phil or Karen or Tom to make things difficult. I simply stopped preventing problems that were not mine to prevent anymore. I stopped being the invisible hand that kept everything steady for people who had decided I was no longer worth keeping. There is a difference between causing damage and simply stepping aside. My first week at CrossPath Dynamics was unlike anything I'd felt in years. Clean desk, clear title, a team that had been told I was coming and seemed genuinely glad I was there. Raymond walked me through the expansion plan on my first morning and asked for my thoughts. He actually waited for the answer. I thought about that on the drive home after that first day, about how rare it is to be in a room where someone asks what you think and means it. I spent 19 years being valuable and invisible. I am done being invisible.